Hey you guys, welcome back to Our Awaken. So for today's conversation, we're going to be talking about anxiety. If you are a person with anxiety, then you understand just how annoying it can be because it just gets like triggered at the worst times, and sometimes you don't really understand what's causing your anxiety, and sometimes it can be crippling to some people depending on how severe your anxiety is. Personally, for me, my anxiety has never been bad to the point where I have panic attacks, but I understand that there are people out there with severe anxiety. And growing up, I can't say that I ever really grew up with anxiety. I was a shy girl, but I noticed that I had anxiety starting in 2020, during the whole pandemic. And I feel like just during that time, things were like really chaotic. We didn't really know honestly what was going on, how things were going to play out. So personally, I feel like that's where it started for me. And that was the point where I actually acknowledged like, okay, I might have anxiety. So let me try to figure out, how can I work with it? How do I avoid creating more anxiety for myself? So I created a list of things that I've acknowledged within myself that I needed to stop doing, that I realized was triggering my anxiety. So hopefully this does help someone. The first thing that I had to stop doing was keeping up with everything in the world. So basically I had to completely tap out of the matrix, and what I mean by that is I had to stop watching the news. I wasn't really on social media like that, so I would honestly take like 6-month breaks where I would deactivate my Instagram, and I just wouldn't keep up with all the trendy things going on, because honestly I feel like with social media as a society we're so overstimulated, but to the point where because it's so normal, people don't acknowledge that, okay, like I'm intaking content all the time and I'm not really giving my brain a break to just relax. If we're not on one app, then we're on another app. If we're not on any apps, then we're listening to music, or if we're not listening to music, then we're texting or on the phone. So it's just always this constant stimulation going on, and I've realized that honestly doesn't help with anxiety because you're just overstimulated. You need time to just sit and be present and just allow your mind to just relax. It's so important to just give your brain a break, give your mind a break, and just tap out of everything that's going on. And considering that we are in a fear-based society, so everything that you see online, they're going to constantly throw chaos at you, and ultimately it's up to you to set that boundary with yourself, because online we can't control what it is that's on there. People are going to post whatever, whenever, however, but you have to be the person to set that boundary with yourself in terms of, okay, this is the type of content that I'm going to intake, and this is the type of content that I'm not going to intake. So basically you have to be really intentional about what you allow yourself to see, hear, and just all the information that you take in. So just be informed on what's going on in the world and stuff like that. But with social media, you have to understand that we see so much more than just what's in our immediate environment, and there's always going to be something going on in the world. So if you're constantly staying in tune with what's going on in this part of the world, what's going on in this part of the world, what's going on in your part of the world, it will get overwhelming, because it's like, wow, there's so much chaos going on in the world, and you kind of will start to feel helpless and just down, and it's depressing. And fear is one of the lowest frequencies, so you want to make sure that you're staying as high vibe as possible and just not feeding into all the chaos. I don't watch scary movies no more, because what you intake is what you're gonna put out. So just make sure that you're feeding yourself positive content if you're gonna be online, and just try to avoid just negativity as much as you can while still keeping yourself informed. Another thing that I stopped doing, and I would have never imagined this was something that was triggering my anxiety, is chewing gum. I had got to a point, especially since I was a lash tech, like I want to make sure my breath is smelling fresh, so I would always chew gum with my clients. And I remember there was a point where I acknowledged with myself like, oh wow, when I'm anxious, I'm chewing gum. So I thought that when I was anxious, chewing gum was helping me, when in fact after a while I started to realize like, wait, this is actually the opposite. When I'm chewing gum, it's like keeping me so stimulated to where sometimes when I just stop and slow down and I'm a little more present in the moment, I'm not really sure if you guys will understand what I'm saying, but the chewing of the gum was creating anxiety in me. Just think about when you're nervous and you're chewing gum, you start to chew the gum faster, right? that's kind of how I was when it came to just chewing gum in general, but it was triggering my anxiety versus actually relieving my anxiety. So now when it comes to chewing gum, even though it is hard because it was such a habit for a couple years, I now try to just keep chewing gum till after I finish my meals when I want to get the taste out of my mouth. But other than that, I try not to chew gum just to chew gum. Another thing that I stopped doing, and I'm gonna put myself out there because I'm human, I'm not perfect, I'm not holier than thou, I stopped sparking up. And I don't know how else to say this on YouTube without possibly getting flagged, but I stopped doing that. And you know, a lot of people feel like when you light up, that relieves you and that calms you down and it makes you less anxious. And although that may be true to some extent, when you continue doing that, it actually does create more anxiety for you. And I'll speak for myself. Yes, there were times where it did slow my mind down. It just keep me calm and mellow, but then it got to a point where what it once did for me, it no longer did for me, and it actually did the opposite, which is kind of weird, but whatever. I'm actually happy that I stopped doing that, so I'm not complaining. The reason why I say it actually created more anxiety was because I used to think like when I do this, I'm able to have more conversations with myself and just slow down and understand my thoughts a little more. But the flip side was I could think about situations and try to come up with conclusions, but because I knew I wasn't in a 100% sober state of mind, I wouldn't feel 100% confident in the conclusion that I came to, because in my mind it's like, now I'm overthinking again, like what if that might not be the case, or what if this perspective actually isn't valid. So I just came to the conclusion that to avoid that, it just makes sense to just have conversations and work things out in a sober state of mind, because then I know that I could trust my judgment more than I would be questioning it. Another thing that I had to stop doing was overthinking and ruminating on situations. And basically ruminating is overthinking, like you're constantly reliving something, or you're constantly thinking about something over and over and over again. Even if you may have came to a conclusion, it's almost like that thought can't leave your mind. But I realized that was just detrimental to my anxiety, because I was always living in the past versus actually living in the present. So if you're always mentally living in the past but you're actively living in the present moment, you're not really in tune with what's going on in the present all the way. So it's kind of hard to know how to continue moving forward. But then also thinking too far into the future was detrimental, because now it's like it will create anxiety of, okay, I want to do this, but how do I get there? And now it's just like, oh my gosh, what if this is not the right path? Or am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to do that? So I just came to the conclusion of I just need to stop thinking so far into the past and so far into the future, and just be more present, because that helps me be grounded. And grounding myself has been such a benefit to me, because like I said, when you're in the present moment, you're aware of what's actually happening. And when it comes to the past, there is nothing wrong with thinking about the past. So my idea of how to navigate life in the best way is to use your past experiences and your past knowledge to help you navigate in your present moment with your future in mind. So it's basically like moving in wisdom, but don't be so stuck in the past to where it's keeping you stagnant. And also don't be so far into the future to where it creates anxiety and fear, to where now you're scared on what step should I take and all of that. Literally just exist and take things step by step. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't stress yourself so much. Sometimes we have answers and sometimes we don't have answers. And if you have a problem, ask yourself, is there something I can do about it? If yes, then take the next step. And if you can't do anything about it, just set it aside and come back to it when the time is right. Another thing that I stopped doing was taking in a lot of opinions. So basically what I mean by that is learning to trust yourself more and using your discernment to help you navigate situations. And although I understand it is good to get other people's opinions, because sometimes people have knowledge that you may not have, or even people see things from a different perspective than you would, being that you're the person in the situation. So sometimes it is good to get other people's opinions, but sometimes when you have so many different opinions plus all the voices in your head, it can get really overwhelming. So I've gotten to a point where if I'm in a particular situation, or I'm trying to figure something out, or just going over certain events that occurred in my life, I like to talk to myself and just figure out my personal opinion on the situations first, have a solid understanding on that, and if necessary, then I may seek out a person's opinion who I trust. But other than that, I don't go to people just for the sake of wanting to talk about my problems and then get their opinions. Because like I said, when you have too many outside voices, it just creates a lot more confusion and chaos. So sometimes it's best to just sit with yourself, take it to God. So now I try not to be like on my phone so much. I try to find activities to actually slow my mind down. So I'm a person, I really love to cook. In times where I'm cooking, I try to be a little more present. I've gotten back into reading, which has been really helpful because it helps slow my mind down. I'm really into arts and crafts, so I like to paint, I'll color, I'll do some DIY activities. All those things help me be more present in the moment because it requires so much of your focus, versus multitasking can be overstimulating, which can trigger your anxiety without you really knowing it. And now I'm going to share with you the thing that has really helped me with my anxiety that I never really would have thought, and it's been there this whole entire time. You hear it so much and you kind of just think like, oh my gosh, I'm tired of hearing this. But when I tell y'all, it's so true. It's the truth. Journaling has been such a holy grail for me when it comes to just relieving my anxiety. And I used to be the person where it's like you hear a lot of cliche things and you're just like, I'm tired of hearing this, or yeah, whatever, I'll get to it. Even when I was in therapy, my therapist would always tell me, start journaling, and I would just be like, I'll get to it, until after a while of me consistently trying to journal. And I'm not saying you have to journal every day, but just have a journal and try to like make it a routine to where it's like, okay, let me just pick up this book and just write down. Even if you do 1 minute, if you do 5 minutes, if you do 10 minutes, you do as long as you want. But the benefits of journaling that I have noticed is that as a person who overthinks, I will have 50 different thoughts in my head all at one time. But when I journal, I'm decluttering my mind. And when you declutter, you allow yourself to acknowledge, but most importantly, process the thoughts that you have in your mind. So whether you have some ideas, or whether you have like answers to your problems, or whether you just have things that are stressing you out, when you journal, you allow yourself the opportunity to acknowledge your thoughts, but also try to work through them and understand them. And it helps so much to declutter, because if you don't acknowledge the things that are going on in your head, but you're just trying to numb it out, distract yourself, or just, like not acknowledge it, you're only creating more chaos within your mind, because you're only cluttering your mind more, and that's ultimately what creates the anxiety. And it's not to say that I'm going to be able to catch every thought that comes within my mind, but the things that are always popping up in my mind, or the things that I find to be like important, when you catch those things and you process them, it just helps you relieve like this weight off your shoulder that sometimes you might not even know, because sometimes you might not even know that something is really bothering you until you acknowledge it. If you find that you have feelings of like, I don't know what's wrong with me, or I feel this way but I don't understand why, sit with yourself in silence and allow yourself to catch whatever thoughts come in. If it's something that's worth processing, then go through that. Sit with the feelings, whether it's good or bad. And if it's just a thought that's just like nothing, then just let it fly. But at least you were able to declutter your mind to get it out. Because imagine if you don't process any of these thoughts. All of this is just staying within your mind, and it's only going to keep piling up. Sometimes you don't know you have a problem until you acknowledge that you have a problem. But if you're not acknowledging that you have a problem, it's only going to fester up within you, and you never know how that's going to come out or how that's going to translate outward. So the more that you acknowledge yourself and become more in tune with yourself, and you build trust within yourself, the less burden and anxiety that you will feel, because you start to develop this sense sense of I know what's going on, I know how to go about things. Because I remember I came across something that said anxiety is just you not knowing what to do or how to go about something. The moment that you process the things that you want to do, the more that you know how to navigate the situation. So just do everything that you can do on your end. I hope these tips are helpful. I understand that it may not help everyone, but the goal is to minimize your anxiety as much as possible with what you're able to do, and take everything one day at a time. The goal is to find a solution to your problems, and it's not to say that you're gonna get the solution right away. Take your time. It's probably taken me about 3 years to get to the point that I'm at now, and I'm still working through it as I learn myself. And I'm also acknowledging, while I'm in the present moment, paying attention to things that do trigger my anxiety. Like I said, I don't keep in tune with social media. I don't pay attention to the news. I avoid being around toxic people that stress me out and just make me feel anxious. And yeah,